So hello and welcome to another episode of the Gaelic Statsman podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Horney. I'm joined tonight by Gaelic Games Fan TV host Aaron Prendergast to discuss this weekend's All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final between Kerry and Donegal. It is the showpiece event in the All-Ireland football calendar as well. And I suppose we'll discuss the Camogie as well later on. Semi-finals there, obviously, between Galway and Tipperary and Cork and Waterford. Cork went for the first three in a row there since the early 1970s. Just before we get into the action, shout out to our sponsors at Capture Athletics. If you want the best gear around, check them out if you haven't already. So yeah, Aaron, All-Ireland football final preview. We're here now. It's the last weekend of the senior men's inter-county season in 2025. Obviously, there is LGFA and Camogie to come up in the next few weeks, of course, and there's a lot more pre-review videos, if you like, in terms of grading teams and all that jazz. But how you've been, Aaron? I suppose Dublin aren't at the final. Well, they weren't last year either. A bit of a weird feeling, but Kerry Donegal should be a good final this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, cheers, Matthew, for having me on the podcast. 100%. Yeah, like as we were speaking last night, like it's the biggest occasion in Gaelic football. It has the makings of being a final that will be hugely entertaining, hugely exciting, especially with the new rules and everything else that have come into play. It's going to be a very exciting game. There's no doubt about it. Both teams are going to be going back and forth. There's a contrast of styles as well. You know, you've got Kerry who play a kicking game. You've got Donegal who play a running game. You've got Clifford versus Murphy. You've got, who's going to pick up Michael Murphy. All sorts of shouts kind of leading up to the week. Who's going to pick up David Clifford? Are some of the potential injured players for Kerry going to start in the likes of Jeremy O'Connor and Paul Gainey? Jack O'Connor, rumours that it could be his last game as manager of Kerry, like all sorts of kind of different scenarios and storylines going into it. And especially when you look at the numbers that both of these two have been racking up, like over the last couple of games. Kerry scored 120 versus Tyrone. They scored nearly 32 points versus Armagh. You're looking at Donegal 325 the last day. So like they're racking up a huge amount of numbers. I think 126 the previous day as well. Like both teams are racking up a huge amount of scores, a huge amount of numbers. Both of players who can do damage in terms of 2-pointers as well. So it has the making of being an absolute cracker. And who knows? Like I definitely would not be surprised. I know with the new rules and everything else, and because it's so much more high scoring, it's harder to probably get a replay now. But in saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if we did go to a replay or at least extra time.
Yeah, it should be very interesting indeed in terms of the weekend in the All-Ireland football final. But we will start off with we can get a game section, and there is one real story to discuss before we get into that. There was a comment in here, a few comments actually from Sean O'Malley, so absolutely love to see it, Sean. They're saying Kieran Mina is going to Derry. Okay, I was going to discuss another Gaelic football introduction as a manager, but I suppose we have to discuss this. Maybe we'll discuss it after the story we were going to discuss about Loud in many ways. Another comment in here. Do you think the games have been as good as the round robin in comparison to Croke Park because of how big it is? And another comment from Sean. Apparently, Dermot O'Connor could be back for Kerry this weekend, and there is rumours Paul Gainey could be in for Kerry as well. We might talk about Kieran Mina, but the manager I was going to talk about in the week in Gaelic Games was Gavin Devlin. The new Loud senior football manager has been announced, and it is Gavin Devlin entering the Loud hot seat. He obviously was the right-hand man to Mickey Hart for so many seasons with Tyrone and for Loud as well. He replaces Joe Brennan in the hot seat as Loud senior football manager. To be honest, Aaron, given he's head of development in Loud GA at the moment as well, given that he was alongside Mickey Hart, it isn't a surprising appointment, and it's a decent appointment for Loud to follow up on a brilliant job that Joe Brennan did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's huge for Loud, huge coup in many ways. Like although he was the head of development and everything else, he's always been a man who has not really been in the spotlight too often. He has been the second-hand man to Mickey Hart, and he's kind of followed, Mickey around kind of everywhere Mickey Hart has kind of gone, and that obviously led him to Loud, led him to Derry, and then he obviously came back to Loud last year to be the head of development. So it's a huge appointment. The fact they've actually got him as manager. It'd be very interesting to see how Gavin Devlin does as a manager as well. In terms of we've seen him sort of be in the background to Mickey Hart. A lot of people have accredited a lot of Mickey Hart's success down to Gavin Devlin and some of the work he's obviously done as well. And yeah, I think it's a great appointment for Loud. I think you were kind of looking at it and thinking, who can they go for here? Are they going to go for the, Ger Brennan worked out really, really well, but it was at the time an outside, we didn't really know how that was going to go. It was an outside shout, really, wasn't it? Like, we didn't know how good Ger Brennan was going to be. So to take another gamble, like there was rumors about Kieran Donaghy maybe potentially going there. Obviously with him leaving Armagh, there was talks maybe, could they, I seen Desi Farrell being kind of shouted out at one stage. He was 16-1, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. So no, I think it's a fantastic appointment for Louth. Hopefully they can kick on. You've got young players coming through there as well. And yeah, hopefully Louth can kind of keep their progress going, because I think, look, it's, we want to see as many teams competitive as possible in Gaelic football. And I know for a lot of our time watching Gaelic football, Matthew, like Louth wouldn't have been, I know we had 2010, but for the majority of the other years, you were talking about a Division 3, Division 4 standard team. So the fact they're up there now, Division 2, winning Leinster titles, like we want to keep them up there.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a very good appointment from a Louth point of view. And yeah, I think Louth are the first team to announce a new manager that obviously had a manager departed. So fair play to them for acting so quick in that regard. And the comment obviously from Sean earlier about Ciarán Mina coming in apparently as a new Derry manager. Obviously that hasn't been announced yet. Then again, it is the LGFA preview next week, so we probably won't discuss it in detail in that episode. We might discuss it now because it is probably as good as confirmed that Ciarán Mina will be the new Derry manager alongside Chrissy McCaig. Obviously, I had Chrissy on this podcast as well. I thought Chrissy would be big into punditry, obviously, and he has been over the last few weeks. So what's your thoughts on that kind of joint managerial role? Ciarán Mina, obviously, been in the Derry job before, did a brilliant job there, did a good job with Dom, being part of the backroom team there as well. But Chrissy McCaig coming in as the joint manager, obviously a captain for so long with that Derry team. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it'll be a fantastic appointment for Derry. It's exactly what they need, in my opinion. Like, I think, look, Ciarán Mina was there under Gallagher when things were rosy in the garden and things were going well. And obviously what happened and Ciarán Mina stepped in. Given everything that went on around that time before they played Armagh, for Ciarán Mina to still have gotten that Derry team over the line versus Armagh, let's not forget as well, they played very, very well against Kerry in that All-Ireland semi-final. They were very unlucky not to win that. And, look, who knows how they would have done against Dublin in the final. Do you know that way? Like it just hasn't worked since then. Mickey Hart didn't work. Paddy Tally was a strange one. Like, Derry had moments in games where they were all right, but they didn't win a game. They didn't win a game at all. And apparently I think it might have been Paddy Tally who actually stepped away there. So look, I think they need to get the players back on side. They have a golden era of players there, and players who are not getting any younger. Like, let's be honest, Conor Glass, Shane McGuigan, Brendan Rodgers, like Chrissy McCaig's already gone. You don't want to lose any more of those kind of key players. Yes, the underage is quite strong in Derry, and there's a few kind of lads coming through, but you need to capitalise while you have these players, because it was only 6-7 years ago where Derry were down at Division 4, like back in 2019. So, and I don't think it would ever get as bad as that again. But, the drop-off could happen for Derry football. It could. So they need to capitalise while they can. I was surprised Ciarán Mina didn't take the job last year, to be honest with you. I don't know if he wasn't offered it. Apparently there was discussions that he turned it down. But no, I think this will be exactly what Derry football needs, and hopefully it can work out for them.
Exactly. So, and we'll see if that is going to be the confirmed managerial appointments in the next few weeks from a Derry point of view. So we have got to that stage now. The All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final for 2025 is between the Kingdom and the men from the hills of Donegal. It is Kerry against Donegal in the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final on Sunday at 3:30 in Croke Park. Live on RT2 in Ireland, BBC Two Northern Ireland in the UK, Sport All in France, which is obviously great to see, and GA Plus worldwide. So it is brilliant that the All-Ireland final is being streamed on most platforms as well as the hurling, obviously being on BBC with the likes of Paul Mescal and Richard Blackmore and all of them on the box as well. So, Aaron, this is a very, very intriguing final, and there is an argument to say. I was chatting to Danny O'Brien this week from Limerick Community Radio, and his show will go out on Saturday morning to discuss the football season and this game in general between Kerry and Donegal and how the new rules have changed the landscape of Gaelic football. And the point was made by myself and Danny, to be fair as well, that the semi-finals weren't very, very good, in fairness, in terms of quality and in terms of maybe the excitement. Like Tyrone and Meath were both totally outclassed by Kerry and Donegal respectively, but hopefully that will be substituted for an absolutely barn burner of a final. Like, we're hoping that'll be the case, aren't we?
100%, yeah. I think like when we seen the draw, there was always that potential that Kerry could beat Tyrone comfortably, Donegal could beat Meath comfortably. I think given how this year's championship has gone, given how well both Meath and Tyrone have performed and improved this year, you were expecting a bit more bite from them teams. It didn't kind of transpire that way. But look, we've got the best two teams in the country. You know, I don't think anybody can dispute that. There was a scenario where Donegal Kerry could have played each other in the final or in the semi-final. You know, and I think we should be glad that this is the final, because I think to have gotten a score like that in a final, you know, would have been a little bit kind of a bit of a dampener. So yeah, both you know, two teams are very, very evenly matched from, you know, 1 to 20, you know, 1 to 26 on each panel. Both have players who can come off the bench and make an impact. Both have star players as well. So yeah, it's set to be an absolute cracker, sold out. And look, I think, you know, last year's final, Armagh Galway, like I was at that game and it wasn't a great game, you know, 6 points apiece at halftime. There was a Seagull, I think, who unfortunately got injured on the pitch as well. You know, I don't think we'll see anything like that. You know, I think the full-time score was like 111 to 12 or 111 to 13 or something like that. We could probably even see something similar at halftime in this game. But in saying that, I actually do have a feeling the start of this game might be a bit nervy and a bit cagey. I think both teams might cancel each other out a little bit. But I think once this gets into, you know, the full nitty gritty, and once both teams settle down, I think we're in store for a cracker.
Yeah, exactly. So it is going to be an absolutely brilliant game of Gaelic football. There's no doubt about that. And we will get into the aspects of the game in just a while. There is a comment in here again from Sean. He's on fire with the comments tonight. I think both of the finalists' opponents are inferior because Croke Park suits them better because of the new rules and Donegal's fitness and Kerry's kicking game. So it'll be interesting. Contrast the sides anyway, obviously with Kerry's kicking game and Donegal's running game as well. It'll be very interesting to see that kind of aspect. But we will go team by team first of all, and then the main aspects in terms of stat averages and matchups and things like that. So we will start off with the men from Munster, the Munster champions, Kerry. Obviously, their journey to the final and their scores as well. Jack O'Connor has led Kerry to yet another All-Ireland final, and we know the omen with Jack O'Connor at this stage. Wins the league, wins the Munster Championship. Well, not the Munster Championship, sorry. They lost the Munster Championship in 2009. Had to mention Cork there. But the reality is, when he wins the league, he wins the All-Ireland afterwards. He won it in 2009, obviously. I think in 2004 as well, and obviously 2022 as well when they beat Galway in the final, Kerry. So we will look at Kerry's journey to the final, starting things off on the pod here. So I think this is their journey to the final, and indeed it is. So in the Munster Senior Football Championship, they started off with a tough game against Cork, below in Park and Keeve on a rainy night. They beat them at the end, 3 goals at 21 points to 125 after extra time. Joe O'Connor being the superhero for Kerry that night below in Cork. Then against Clare, very comfortable in the Munster final from a Kerry point of view. 420 to 21 points. They beat Roscommon 3 goals and 18 points to 17 points to start their All-Ireland group campaign, and then beat Cork 128 to 20 points in a game full of controversy in terms of the kick-out rule, in terms of the respectful rule that offered Kerry a lot of 2-point effort from Sean O'Shea Freeze, but Kerry did get over the line fairly and squarely that day. Then probably the turning point on Kerry's season, they lost to Meath 122 to 16 points, a 9-point defeat in Tullamore. That was a difficult one to take on the badge from a Kerry point of view. They then hammered Cavan 3 goals and 20 points to 117. Beat Armagh. Now this was an absolute statement performance. They won 32 points to 121, scored 30 points from play that day from a Kerry point of view, which was absolutely superb. And then against Tyrone, beat them by 6 points in the All-Ireland semi-final. 1 goal at 20 points to 17 points. They've averaged a score 222 per game and conceded an average of 119. So very impressive there from a Kerry point of view in terms of their goal getting more than anything, averaging 2 goals a game. When you look at their scores, and we will probably discuss this as an element of the game, Aaron, in terms of Kerry scores, they're David Clifford on top with 8 goals and 53 points. Sean O'Shea on 1 goal and 44. The next best is 210. Paul Ganey has been injured since the end of the Cork game, so we have to grant him that. And possibly he could be in action this Sunday if he is fit, of course. Dylan Gainey has 13 points. Joe O'Connor 1-7. Even though his scoring's been low, he's been absolutely brilliant in midfield. Killian Spillane with 9 points. Paddy Clifford with 7 points. Mayael Burns with 1-3. You can see down the list of Kerry scores there as well. So looking at the journey to the final, the scores there, I think the main thing that pops off the sheet there, in terms of the scores anyway, David Clifford and Sean O'Shea, they're the two main guys for Kerry. The next best is Paul Gainey on 210. They don't have a great kind of spread of scores. Do you think that's a concern for Kerry going into Sunday?
I think it could be, yeah, because look at it. There has been the argument over the last couple of years that they've been very over reliant on David Clifford a little bit, and I think maybe it has been overstated ever so slightly. But look, I think when you look at the numbers, there's no doubt that David Clifford, does the body of work, doesn't he? But the thing is, David Clifford is so good that this Kerry team can do that. Do you know what I mean? And it still can be good enough to win you an All Ireland. Like he's an absolute freak of nature, David Clifford. He is one of the best of all time. I think when it's all said and done, he probably will be the greatest of all time. I think to say that right now is probably a bit kind of premature, but in saying that though, he's a phenomenal talent. And then like you're kind of looking outside that, and like Donegal probably in terms of a system are probably better. They've more players overall who can do damage, but Kerry have the player who can do the most damage, if that makes sense. And Sean O'Shea as well. Like Sean O'Shea's been an interesting one. He was phenomenal versus Armagh, but aside from that, he hasn't really kind of found it this year. And it'd be interesting to see whether he can produce a top performance. I think he will need to produce a top performance if Kerry are to get over the line. You've obviously got Paddy Clifford as well, who's the man who's kind of, linking it all together a little bit, and how crucial could he be? But I think, look, there's a reason why they're probably rushing Paul Gainey and Jeremy O'Connor back into training a little bit, in particular Paul Gainey from attacking perspective. Big game player as well, who can do damage. But Tony Brosnan probably doesn't contribute enough. Killian Spillane, great player to bring off the bench, but probably not good enough when starting. And Kerry's forwards overall, outside of Clifford, Sean O'Shea and Paddy Clifford, probably are quite ordinary, if we're being honest. I think Paul Gainey, maybe aside, is quite good, but I think the rest are fairly average, really. But the thing is, David Clifford and Sean O'Shea are that good that they can do the damage. And then they've obviously got, Joe O'Connor bursting from midfield behind as well, who's a phenomenal footballer in his own right. But, it's easier said than done in terms of stopping David Clifford. And that is the big question. How do you stop him? And that'll be for Jim McGuinness to figure out.
Exactly. So it should be very interesting in terms of that. And we will discuss the full forward lines in detail in later on in the podcast in terms of shooting accuracies. But just a spoiler alert for that, Dylan Gainey hasn't really hit the heights in terms of shooting accuracy there. Whereas Paul Gainey, the games that he has played this year, has. And you mentioned he's a big game player there. Like, just a question on Kerry before we move on to Donegal. We mentioned Paul Gainey's strengths, and in terms of a big game player, he can be a threat in terms of a forward. Do you see him starting on Sunday, if fit, obviously?
It's a hard one, really, to be honest with you, because it's like, I think, look, it'll be down to Jack O'Connor, really. I think it'll be a risk if you start him and then things go south, and he's not fit enough, and then you have to take him off. He's, by the time 40, 50 minutes comes around, he's absolutely goosed. Or 30, half time, he's absolutely goosed. So it'll depend on fitness. That's the fitness, sharpness. Maybe starting him because he can kind of work his way into the game, whereas if he comes off the bench, he'll have to get up to the pace of the game very, very quickly, and it could pass him by a little bit. So look, it's going to be down to sharpness and fitness. Only Jack O'Connor and the Kerry management team will know that. But absolutely, he'll be if he doesn't start, he'll be the first substitute, I think, that comes on for Kerry. And I think they'll bring him on early. But in saying that, like, what a player, like, if this game's in the melting pot, what a player to bring on with 20 minutes to go. You know what I mean? And we talk about Patrick McBrearty being able to come on for Donegal and what an option that is. But I do think, Paul Gainey could be absolutely huge. Like, scored a goal against Dublin in the final a couple of years ago. Very underrated footballer, I think, Paul Gainey. He always pops up with big goals. We've seen him do it for Donegal as well down the years. Pops up with big goals time and time again. He was a big player, I remember, even in the 2014 final as well. So big player, and we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. It should be very interesting to see that. Sean has a comment in here, maybe aiming something at both of us here. You say Kerry players and average in comparison, our average in comparison to Clifford and O'Shea, but they had a variety of scores against Armagh. I suppose the point we're saying, Sean, you look at the scores list there. The next best score
Mm.
after the two big boys is Paul Ganey with 210. Like Aaron makes an
Yeah.
excellent on Tony Brosnan, only 5 points this year. Killian Spillane only 9, 7 from play. Like that's not really hitting the lights out. Yes, they're capable of it in the final, but up until now, they haven't really been doing that. And we'll mention Donegal's scores in just a bit. But before we get on to Donegal's, a response to that, Aaron, I think we'd probably stick with our own opinions there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think against Armagh, like a lot of the Kerry players just had the game of their life. Like Micheál Burns was coming on skinning players left, right, and centre. Like he was having an absolute cracker of a game. Dylan Gainey, Graham O'Sullivan was slotting points as well. Like they had the absolute game of their life. Look, they're still good players, but I just think David Clifford and Sean O'Shea are miles above. That way? I think if you're comparing Donegal 6 forwards and Kerry 6 forwards, like you're probably Clifford, Sean O'Shea, Paddy Clifford get in there, but I think you put the other 3 Donegal forwards in,
Exactly so, and we will move on nicely to Donegal, obviously the Ulster Senior Football Champions for the second year running, and that was after a point win over Armagh. We will discuss it in Donegal's journey to the final. Jim McGuinness's side have done absolutely brilliantly this season, so this is Donegal's journey to the final. They beat Derry by 10 points the first day out, 125 to 115. Beat Monaghan by 2 points. I think that was Donegal's, well, other than the Tyrone game, which they actually lost, which we'll mention later. And that was their tightest win anyway, 23 points to 21, or one of the tightest anyway. Against Down, they beat them 119 to 16 points. And then against Armagh, after extra time, they beat them eventually 223 to 28 points, thanks largely to a Kieran Moore goal in extra time, the clutch player as he is. Against Tyrone, they lost that game, but above Ballybuffet, 20 points to 217. They then beat Cavan comfortably, 3 goals and 26 points to 1 goal and 13, and then beat Mayo 19 points to 115, and knocking the Green and Red out of the All-Ireland Championship. Crazy times that. They then beat Louth and Ballybuffet 222 to 12 points. Then beat Monaghan. They beat them in the return game as well, 126 to 120, and then beat Meath 3 goals and 26 points to 15 points. They've averaged a score 124 per game and conceded an average of 116. We talk about Kerry scoring 222, but Donegal averaging 24 points is singular points. That's absolutely brilliant in its own right from a Donegal point of view there. And you look at Donegal's scores, and we talked about Kerry's scores, and they didn't have enough variety. You look at Donegal's scores there, Michael Murphy, 44 points, but it isn't just the big man himself. Conor O'Donnell, 3 goals and 21 points, all from play. Michael Langan, 1 goal and 25 points from midfield. Paddy McBrearty, who's been on the bench for most of the season with 1 goal and 23 points. Kieran Thompson with 1 goal and 22. Oisin Gannon, 1 goal and 21. Darrow Boyle, 115. Like, that's the thing. Like, Kerry's 7th top scorer is Paddy Clifford. Their 8th top scorer is Micheál Burns. Paddy Clifford has 7 points. Micheál Burns has 1-3. When you look at Donegal, their 7th top scorer is Darrow Boyle with 115. Their 8th top scorer joint is Peadar Morgan with 14 points and Kieran Moore with 2-8. Like, that is the difference that we're trying to explain on the podcast here. Shane O'Donnell has scored little enough with 11 points, but in fairness, he has done well in assisting scores. And even then, Finbar Rorty scored 1-5. That's more than Paddy Clifford. Paddy Clifford has 7 points. Finbar Rorty is 1-5. So, like, the point we're trying to make is the scores that Donegal have, and you obviously can't see the scores on the screen there. But Donegal have a lot of scores up and down the field. Like, even their defensive players. I was doing a few bits of figures earlier in terms of their defensive players. Peadar Morgan, 14 points. Finbar Rorty, 1-5. Kieran Moore, if you count him as a defender, he did play wing forward against Meath, to be fair, 2 goals and 8 points. Ryan McHugh, 6 points. Cialan McColgan, 1-2. Even Sean Patton, a goal is chipped in with 2 points. Like, even for defence, Donegal are really chipping in all over the pitch, not just the forwards.
Yeah, very, very well rounded. And like, and even Darrow Boyle, like, scoring 115, which you're kind of seeing that and thinking, like, he hasn't started a lot of games this year as well. Do you know what I mean? For him to kind of chip away at 115 is very impressive. Patrick McBrearty as well probably shows the credit to Donegal's bench. But yeah, like, it kind of backs up the point. Look, I think Kerry have the best forward on the pitch, but Donegal are more well-rounded and they've more variety, and that's why it's a system-based team versus individual brilliance, essentially. Kerry could very well win this because of the fact of their players who can step up on the big occasion. They've been there and done it, and David Clifford will do something freakish. Sean O'Shea will step up in the closing moments. Like if it's a close game with a couple of minutes to go, Kerry are winning this. There's no doubt about that. But if Donegal's system and tactically, if Donegal can dominate, if Sean Patton can get his kickouts out, if Donegal can retain possession, maybe press up on Kerry's kickouts and do damage there, a bit like what Tyrone did. Let's not forget in that opening 10 minutes. Tyrone did a lot of damage in that opening 10 minutes. It took a while for Kerry to settle into it. If Donegal can keep something like that and build up a lead, I feel like that's how Donegal win it, to be honest with you. I think a lot has been said as well about endurance and fitness as well, that Donegal are maybe a fitter team and that kind of thing. I'd actually disagree with a lot of commentary in relation to that. I actually think Kerry are an extremely fit team. You saw versus Armagh Tyrone how much they pulled away kind of in the third quarters and fourth quarters as well. So it's very, very even.
It is, to be fair. And Sean asked a very good question in terms of Donegal's defence here. It depends how Donegal defend. Armagh defended very zonally and focused much on Clifford, while the other players had complete freedom. It's more of a statement than a question, but it does lead on to a question in its own right. Just a comment in here from Sean again. Looking forward to the midfield battle, especially if Dermot O'Connor is a factor, especially if it's Michael Langan against Joe O'Connor. That's very, very appetising in its own right. But going back to the first point that Sean made, in terms of Armagh defending zonally, what would you do in a Donegal scenario here defensively? Would you put Brendan McCall on Clifford? I know we'll talk about matchups in much more detail later on in the podcast, but in terms of Clifford, do you mark him fully, or do you have to concentrate on other players despite the fact they haven't performed for Kerry? What's your kind of thinking around Donegal there?
Well, it's an interesting one. Like if you watch Donegal versus Meath and versus Monaghan, they would actually let, like especially against Monaghan. Against Meath they were slightly different, but against Monaghan they would let certain players have the ball outside the arc, and they would invite them to shoot. They'd invite them to take the chances. They'd invite them to kind of go for it and take the 2 pointers on. I do think, look, Brendan McCall will go on David Clifford. I think two things will be done. I think the first main thing really is cutting off the supply to David Clifford, which I think is easier than actually, stopping David Clifford himself. Because like if David Clifford gets the ball on a half turn, like he so often does in the corner, and it's 1v1, it's game over. Do you know what I mean? Either one, he's putting the ball over the bar, or two, he's going to skin McCall inside now, and then he's going to be going through for a goal. So I think that's going to be the big thing, is cutting off the supply, whether that's from Paddy Clifford, from the likes of Dermot O'Connor if he starts, or, coming up from midfield, the wing backs as well, like Gavin White and these kind of players who could kind of play ball into Clifford. So that's going to be kind of the big thing, really. And then, like I think, look, you try and, like you look at Donegal, they probably will try and flood their own 20-metre line and try and crowd it out, I think, is the best way to do it. Because at least if Clifford gets past McCall, you have other defenders there. But it's a difficult one. Look, this is why Jim McGuinness is one of the smartest minds in Gaelic football, and we saw what Liam Cahill did on Sunday. Could Jim McGuinness come up with some sort of plan? We're all saying McCall will go on him. Who knows? Maybe McGuinness goes, Michael Langan, you go on him or something like that. Does something crazy that we don't expect. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, by the way, and I don't think it should happen, but just as an example, something mad might happen. So, look, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, Liam Cahill showed curveball and putting Ronan Maher on Brian Hayes against Cork. Obviously, we thought it would be Owen Connolly last week, but of course it was. It was Maher against Hayes, and we all know how that obviously turned out. Just in regards to Donegal's journey to find another kind of interesting point here from Sean. Donegal, I think, had slightly less of a challenge in the quarter in the semi-final. Quite an interesting point there when you look at it. Donegal had Monaghan and Meath, Kerry had Armagh and Tyrone. Then again, Meath beat Kerry, and they beat Galway, and of course they beat Dublin. So the fact that Donegal absolutely battered them by 20 points, does it indicate that Meath burned out a bit, or does it indicate that Donegal are just a super team that is really well coached under McGuinness?
Yeah, I think it's a reverse order though, isn't it? Like Donegal have beaten those teams. I know they didn't beat Tyrone, but they did play them. Look, they beat Armagh, they had a much tougher provincial championship than Kerry. Donegal had to play Three very, very grueling games in the provincial championship, as opposed to, look, I know Kerry had their struggles versus Cork, but by all accounts, it's not the same as playing Armagh, Monaghan, Down and Derry. Do you know what I mean? Like it's far more tougher. 4 games actually. Donegal played in Ulster there, so yeah, like it's I think in regards to Meath burning out, probably, yeah. And Meath, probably, it's a young team, it's a confidence team. You saw when the game was gone, they just lost their heads completely. And Donegal didn't take their foot off the gas. They were going full throttle, not holding back at all. So yeah, like I think like Donegal, like they have more guns, they have more weapons to hurt you, but Kerry is the one with the missile, and David Clifford,
Yeah, exactly. So, and that leads us on to the stat averages. And in terms of stats and overall, obviously, this is stats from all the games from Kerry and Donegal, not including some games. Just a note here for Kerry, it doesn't include the games against Meath, which wasn't televised, obviously, and the Cavan game. Obviously, I didn't have time to watch it back. On that day, Cork were playing Dublin in the All-Ireland preliminary quarterfinals, so I didn't have time to do that. Donegal doesn't include their game against Cavan in the group stages of the All-Ireland because, obviously, the game wasn't televised. So this is the average stats on what I could get out of Kerry and Donegal in terms of that. So on the screen there, you can see from Kerry's point of view and Donegal's point of view, in goals scored, Kerry win the battle there, 1.88 goals per game. Donegal have 1.3. Goals conceded, again, Kerry win the battle slightly, 0.5 to 0.6. In fact, Kerry have conceded 4 goals in the championship so far this season, and those were against Cork, Cavan. They didn't concede any against Armagh and Tyrone, for example. They conceded a goal against Cavan. They conceded Brian Menton against Meath, and against Cork. And yeah, they haven't conceded much goals, Kerry. And look at the 2-pointers. Kerry have more, actually, 3.13 compared to Donegal's 2.6. That is quite a surprise, considering Kerry's reluctance maybe to go for 2-pointers at the start of the championship campaign, but they have grown into it, in all fairness to them. 2-pointers conceded, although Kerry have conceded 3.63 2-pointers a game. That, if you round that up, that's 4, Aaron. That's very, I would say, concerning from a Kerry point of view, even though Donegal kind of work it into the best position and kick it over the bar from there. 2-pointers conceded for Donegal, 2.3 on average. When you look at the total scored and when you look at the average total scored there, the first number there is goals. The second number in the brackets, obviously, is 2-pointers, and the last number is 1-pointers. So Kerry have 2, 3, 16, so 3 2-pointers a game, obviously 61 pointers at 2 goals. Donegal 1 goal, 3 2-pointers, and 18 1-pointers. Then conceded, Kerry 1 4 11, and then Donegal 1 2 12. So again, very, very tight on that aspect as well. When you look at misses, again, very, very similar stats there. Kerry 10.17, Donegal 11.1, and then 14 each in terms of misses against. Then you look at shooting accuracies. Kerry is 68%, Donegal 67%. That's very, very similar in its own right there as well. And misses against, again, very, very neck and neck between the two of them. 53% Kerry have conceded against their opposition, Donegal 52%. And when you look at the turnovers there, 50-50 from a Kerry point of view, 14.83 to 14.33. Donegal, 12.78 to 11.22. Again, similar enough in terms of the way the turnovers are going there. In terms of kickouts, Donegal have slightly more with 68.44%, whereas Kerry is 67.5%. But the Kerry one is actually low because of 2 games in particular, and 2 games against the same opposition. Cork did very well at wiping out the Kerry midfield, but then against the likes of Armagh and Tyrone, Kerry have actually done really, really well in midfield with the likes of Joe O'Connor and in fairness, Sean O'Brien and Mark O'Shea, who have stepped in, and that probably indicates, number one, Kerry's midfield isn't as bad as we think, and number 2, Cork are actually a bit underrated when it comes to midfield, but that's a discussion for another day. Kickouts won in opposition terms, again, similar enough. Kerry 39.5%, Donegal 35%. And then when you look at the frees, Kerry have much more there with 15.33 to Donegal's 8.89. And then when you look at frees conceded, Kerry conceded 13.33 per game. Donegal have conceded 9.67 per game. Lot of stats to go into there, Aaron, but what's the one, I'll leave up the image there. What's the one that jumps out to you in many ways?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, like I suppose firstly just how even both of them are. Like there's very, very little between them. Like there, and we're saying how even the game could be, kind of coming into Sunday, and you're looking at it there. Now I know there's a few games maybe missing that might maybe sway it a little bit, but overall it's probably around about that anyway. Yeah, I suppose like in terms of maybe a stat that's probably most surprising, probably is that 2 pointers that you said for Kerry. A little bit surprised by that. I would have thought Donegal would have been a little bit further ahead in regards to that. But then again, Donegal's, I don't even think they scored a 2 pointer versus me, did they? Like
They got 1 2-pointer in the whole game.
in the whole game, yeah. And it's one of them like where I feel like Donegal have gone for 2 pointers when they've kind of needed them, or maybe at the start of games, that way. Like it's not something they've kind of focused on too much, really. But yeah, like other than that, it's very, very even. Like and even looking at turnovers as well. For Kerry, like to be fair to Kerry, they have been brilliant on turnovers this year, and it has been mentioned. Like against Tyrone, they were fantastic. Against Armagh, they were brilliant, and that could actually be an area that Kerry could win the game on. Because when you think about Donegal, there's probably going to be moments when they're going to try run it through Kerry's, kind of half back line. When they have possession of the ball, and could we see turnovers in that area of the pitch, and then Kerry breaking with pace? That could be a real area where this game could be won and lost.
Yeah, exactly. Some very interesting stats there. And when you look at the kickouts, in many ways, from a Kerry point of view, they've excelled in nearly all the games this season. And so have Donegal, in fairness, with Patton's kind of long kickout. Every time I watch Patton's kickout, it goes beyond the opposition 65. And even on a calm day, which we're hoping that will be the case on Sunday, could that be a deciding factor as well? Because Kerry have ball winners there. Joe O'Connor, if Dermot O'Connor is fit, he can play there as well. To be fair, Mark O'Shea has deputised really well in the last couple of games for Kerry. But then you look at Donegal, you have Michael Langan in there, possibly Hugh McFadden, and you have the boot of a kick that Sean Patton has. So that's going to be an interesting kind of dynamic too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when you look like Ethan Rafferty and Noel Morgan, do you know what I mean? Like, you're talking about two players who can boot the ball as well, who can get range on the kickouts. Now, I think Ethan Rafferty panicked a little bit when that kind of mad kind of passage of play was taking place. But they dealt very well with Noel Morgan. Like, they were dropping off a little bit on his kickouts. They were pressing him at different stages. They were mixing it up, kind of keeping him guessing. And I think they'll do the exact same with Sean Patton as well. It will be interesting to see as well, like whether Kerry concede the short kick out and they say, let's let you have it. Donegal, if you want the ball, you can have it. We'll allow you to have possession of the ball, which Donegal will keep at different stages. And then as well as that, do Kerry press up, very relentlessly like they did, versus Armagh in that game where, Armagh just couldn't get out. They couldn't get the ball out at all. And be interested to see if Kerry do something similar with Sean Patton and Donegal. Now, I think the difference is Donegal have a real vocal presence in Michael Murphy that they can kick. If you're bypassing midfield, you've got a Michael Murphy that you can kick there. Armagh didn't have that. Tyrone didn't have that either. So that could be a big difference potentially on Sunday.
Possibly so, and some interesting stats. Look at that. In fairness, and look at the head-to-head. Obviously, the Cork and Tip game last week, there was 100 games nearly to look between the two. That took a lot of researching and things like that. This week, it doesn't really. There's been 3 championship games between Kerry and Donegal, interestingly enough, and all of them have come since 2010. So the first one, if you're looking at chronologically, was 2012. Donegal won that quarter final, 112-110. Obviously, Jim McGuinness won the All-Ireland with Donegal that season. 2014, that was the final, of course. Eamon Fitzmaurice beating Jim McGuinness that year 2-9 to 12 points. And Donegal got more scores, but Kerry won the day. And then in 2019, the Super 8s game, that was an absolutely brilliant game and probably underrated in terms of looking back at history. That was a 120 apiece draw on that day. So in many ways, Aaron, the fourth game between these two sides, in many ways, he's kind of the decider. But first of all, are you shocked that this is the 4th championship meeting between the two sides?
Yeah, it probably is a little bit surprising that they haven't met each other more. But I suppose maybe context is needed, and like pre 1992, like Donegal weren't a big firepower or anything like that, and there was obviously no backdoor back then as well. So then even in the 90s as well, like when you look at how strong Ulster was even after that. So there was a lot of times where Donegal didn't make it through the 2000s as well. Like Donegal football wasn't in a great state at all, to be honest. Like when you're kind of going back there, sort of pre they had a couple of spells here and there and moments here and there, but it's probably just one of them as well where the draw just hasn't happened as well. Which is probably a little bit of a surprise when you kind of think about it. Mad to think their first ever championship meeting was 2012. I would have been sure there would have been other ones in there, but yeah, like that's kind of a mad statistic there, in fairness. And it's mad as well. Like, wasn't Jack O'Connor's last game as Kerry manager against Donegal in 2012, and Jim McGuinness's last game in his first spell as Donegal manager was against Kerry. Obviously Eamon Fitzmaurice was managing Kerry that day, but yeah, there is some kind of storyline scenarios there. The 2019 Super 8s game, remember watching that and thinking, Jesus, like, after watching Donegal in that game, I was sure they were going to be the closest challengers to Dublin that year, and then they didn't even make it out of the group. So, but yeah, kind of mental. Kind of looking back at that there, and probably is a little bit unusual that they haven't played each other more.
It is definitely, and looking at Sean's comment in here, the third quarter will be key in this game. Both teams do a lot of damage to their opponents in the semis. It could be a shootout or a one-sided game, depending who gets on top in that period. Thoughts on that? Like, could that be a decisive factor?
100%, yeah. Like, it's that the third quarter could be an absolute frenzy. It could be an absolute shootout, back and forth. I think it will be very fascinating to see, because it will just be interesting to see if any team kind of gets on top. Like, I am very curious to see what happens if Donegal can get a lead on Kerry. Let's say they have a really good patch in the game and build up a lead on Kerry, whether Kerry can respond, and whether they can get back, and whether Donegal let them come back, because like Donegal have been very good this year when they've had leads in games. They very, very rarely let them slip. So that'll be very interesting to see. And Donegal have the capabilities and the know-how to shut a game down, to keep the ball, to slow it down. You saw them do it versus Meath and kind of take the sting out of Meath. They'd slow the ball down for a couple of minutes and then bang, bang, bang over the bar. You know what I mean? So yeah, that'll be an interesting facet to it as well. But yeah, the third quarter is going to be absolutely huge to see, and it'll be very interesting to see kind of going into that final quarter who has the edge.
Exactly. So, and look, the next facet, and it is the full forward lines. Obviously, I did have an image with the Tip and Cork game last week in terms of the full forwards, in terms of their shooting accuracies. I do have it for Donegal and Kerry slightly different, but I didn't have time to make the image. It will be available on my page tomorrow. But in terms of, I'll read the figures from the doc I have here in terms of the shooting accuracy. So for Donegal, it is their last 4 games, it's from the games against Meath, Louth, Monaghan, and Meath combined, leading into this final. So Donegal's full forward line: Conor O'Donnell, first of all, 2 goals and 11 points from play, 13 shots converted out of 18 attempts, 72% shot accuracy. Michael Murphy, 18 points, 5 frees, 2 2-pointed frees and 1 2-pointer, 15 chances taken out of 22 opportunities, 68% shooting accuracy for Michael Murphy there. And Oisin Gallen, 1 goal and 11 points, all from play there. 12 shots converted out of 19. It's 63% shot accuracy, still above 60%. Very, very good in fairness. For Kerry, again, same old tale. Look at the forwards there. David Clifford and Sean O'Shea. Starting off with David Clifford. This is Kerry's last 4 available games, if that makes sense, because obviously the Cavan game wasn't enough time to do that, and the Meath game wasn't televised. So this is games against Armagh, against Tyrone, against Cork, and against Roscommon combined. So looking at David Clifford, in those games combined, he got 3 goals and 27 points, 6 frees, 4 2-pointers, and 2 2-pointed frees. Out of those, he converted 24 shots out of 35, 69% shot accuracy for David Clifford. You mentioned Sean O'Shea has had a poor enough season other than the Armagh game, Aaron. Listen to these stats: 31 points out of them 4 available games in the data there. 8 frees, 5 2-pointed frees, 3 2-pointers, 23 shots taken out of 29 attempts, 79% shot accuracy. Like that. Yeah. That's really, really impressive from Sean O'Shea. And this, again, this is why I was mentioning Paul Geaney might start and things like that. Paul Gainey's obviously for the 2 games against Cork across common because he was injured for the quarterfinal and the semi-final. Across the 2 games against Cork at the Rossies, he got 1 goal and 3 points. That's 4 attempted shots out of 5, 80% shot accuracy. Say what you want about Paul Gainey, he's very, very accurate in what he does. On the flip side then with Dylan Gainey, 3 points out of his last 4 games, or the 4 games available, 3 shots taken out of 7, 43% shot accuracy. So I think Donegal's, again, as we mentioned, well-rounded in terms of their shooting accuracy. It's very, very impressive there. It does emphasise the point that Paul Gainey probably has to start over his namesake Dylan. But Sean O'Shea, Aaron, 79% out of that data. That's superb.
Yeah, no, it is in fairness. And I think it's an interesting one because was 11, did he score 11 points versus Armagh? So 11 of those 23. 12 points of them 23 came in one game. Do you know what I mean? And I think
31. It's including 2 pointers as well. Like,
yeah, 12 out of 31. Like it's, yeah, no, absolutely. Like it maybe makes me eat my words a little bit. I think just from, you can only go off what you see and what you kind of pick up. And maybe at times I felt he just hasn't been involved enough in games, or do you know what I mean? It's not been necessarily the shooting aspect of it, where he's been putting chances wide or playing poorly. It's just he hasn't been in the games enough. Do you know what I mean? But like in Crow Park, look, he's going to really, really step up. But 100% though, yeah, like when you kind of read through the stats there, like, I mean, it shows how evenly matched they are in terms of high quality forwards. But then, yeah, when you kind of look outside, Kerry's kind of prominent front 3 forwards of Paul Gainey, David Clifford and Sean O'Shea, the standards do drop a little bit. And I think that's going to be something that Jack O'Connor is going to have to, because you could, I think one thing we know for certain is that David Clifford, Paddy Clifford and Sean O'Shea start. And then will Paul Gainey start? We'll see. But then the other 2 forwards, you could kind of, you can make a case for anyone. Could be a Graham O'Sullivan. Maybe you might put him in there. You might put Micheál Burns in. You could go Killian Spillane, Tony Brosnan, Dylan or Conor Gainey. Like there's a number of different options that they could potentially go for.
Exactly, and it will be very interesting to see that kind of element as well. Look at the matchups now in terms of this game. It's going to be very interesting to see that. I think we've said in the podcast already, Brendan McCall looks the favourite to go on David Clifford. In terms of Sean O'Shea, from the Kerry forwards and the Donegal defensive point of view, who would you put on Sean O'Shea? Would you put Owen Bon Gallagher on him? Even though he is kind of attacking minded, it's an interesting one to call.
Yeah, it is a difficult one. Yeah, I think it's again. I think Owen Bon Gallagher will be the man who will be closest to him. But again, I think it will be a case of trying to cut off that, trying to flood their own kind of inside 20-meter line, to try and kind of cut off the space. And I think there'll be a big. I think whoever does pick up Sean O'Shea, whether it be an Owen Bon Gallagher, touch tight to Sean O'Shea. You don't want to let him create the space. You don't want to let him create the opportunities to kick 2-pointers, because he could do serious damage. It's hard to know kind of outside of that. Like obviously that's a kind of matchup kind of player for player. What would you be thinking? Would you be going towards Bon Gallagher as well?
I probably would, to be honest, but look at Donegal's kind of options there. It is kind of interesting to call. If you look at Donegal's defenders for the last game against me, Caelan McColgan, not enough game time this year, too much pressure on the guy, but then again, it could be a curveball there. Ryan McHugh, then again, the thing is, if Ryan McHugh goes on Sean O'Shea, that would kind of force Sean O'Shea to go back. And would that suit Donegal in its own right? Then again, Owen Bon Gallagher, you could argue, is the same. Paddy Morgan had definitely the temperament and the speed and the stamina to keep up with Sean O'Shea. But do you want to take out Paddy Morgan's attacking ability? He scored 14 points in the championship. Do you want to take that out to accommodate the mark Sean O'Shea? It's quite an interesting one. And then again, Finbar Roarty has had a brilliant season, but he's young. He's very, very young. So judging by that, I think if not Bon Gallagher, I think Ryan McHugh is probably going to be the guy to mark Sean O'Shea.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think as well, like a Ryan McHugh kind of bursting up, kind of along the wing, kind of bursting forward could cause a good bit of damage, and potentially going the other way. Like I did see Kerry's team actually did get announced, and I was just kind of having I was just kind of looking at it there, and there's no Paul Gainey in the starting 15, like he's on the bench, like you've got Graham O'Sullivan, Mark O'Shea named at midfield, Joe O'Connor at 10. They'll probably swap around. So, yeah, I think like it looks like the same team that played the last day. Maybe looking at it there. So, I think
it's lucky as well. Just on a side note, Aaron, no Thomas Sullivan at all.
Yeah, he's not even on the bench. Yeah,
No.
that's an interesting one. Yeah.
And thank God I've seen that, because I was going to mention on the other side there. Well, just before that, like who else needs pointing from a Kerry point of view? Like Joe O'Connor. Joe O'Connor's actually named at 10 for Kerry, but you'd imagine he has to be midfield, surely.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely, yeah. Like I think it's one now where Jack O'Connor is probably keeping his cards close to his chest here. I think it's very like the fact that Joe O'Connor's named the 10 is that Jeremy O'Connor sweeping back in to play at number 9 potentially. As a late change. And then maybe Paul Gainey for Dylan Gainey. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. I think we might see some changes there.
I think we will, no doubt about it. We look at the other side then in terms of picking up Donegal's forwards. Obviously, Kerry, Donegal have to man Mark Clifford, David Clifford, obviously Sean O'Shea, potentially Paddy Clifford as well. Actually, Paddy Clifford, we didn't mention him. Who was on Paddy? Patter Morgan, possibly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think Patter Morgan would be a great matchup to go on him there. I think as well, like in terms of energy, the energy that Paddy Clifford brings, the positions that he picks up, I think Patter Morgan's a player who can keep with him, and then also kind of going the other way as well. We know Patter Morgan loves to kind of burst forward as well. So no, yeah, I think that would be that's a no-brainer. I think, yeah.
I think so as well. And you look at it from the Kerry point of view there, Michael Murphy, this is the big one. Out of the Kerry backs, the 6 that are named in the backs for Kerry, and this is confirmed, by the way, the team was announced a while ago. Paul Murphy, Jason Foley, Dylan Casey, Brian O'Biogli, Mike Breen, Gavin White. And as we mentioned previously, just a few seconds ago, Thomas Sullivan is not on the match day panel. So there's no late change for Thomas Sullivan to come in. He is not fit to play in this All-Ireland final. So it's quite a big decision for Kerry. Who would you put on Michael Murphy from a Kerry point of view?
I think probably Jason Foley. I think kind of looking at it in terms of a matchup there, I mentioned on our show yesterday, I have seen some shouts that potentially it could be a Joe O'Connor in terms of size, in terms of physical presence. I think it's a difficult one because there isn't a player who kind of immediately springs to mind that could really match Michael Murphy. I think Jason Foley is probably the closest maybe to him. I think Paul Murphy, I think size wise, that would be complete mismatch. Could they go rogue a little bit? And an interesting one is Toig Morley. Like if Toig Morley starts, and I think he is on the bench from what I've seen, if he comes in, could he be an option maybe?
Yeah, just seeing. Yeah, Toig Morley is confirmed to be on. Who would you put Toig Morley instead of, though? I would imagine it has to be Mike Breen at that.
Yeah, Mike Breen. Yeah, see, that's I wouldn't know too much about Mike Breen. Like he's obviously not been a kind of regular starter, so I don't know how he would match up with Murphy. Like it could be one of them though that, like we have a lot of these finals, a lot of these games, a lot of these matchups that we don't expect. And then we're all talking about him come full time. So, but I think that screams risky to me. You want to go with an experienced player of like I think it probably will be Jason Foley.
Yeah, I'd probably think so as well. Sean in with another comment in here. The weather could also be a factor for the game. If it's raining, it will suit Donegal. If it's dry, it will suit Kerry. We'll stick on the matchups and we might get back to that point there, Sean. Looking at Donegal's corner forwards there, Conor O'Donnell and Oisin Gallen. Would you imagine? Could you see that? I think Oisin Gallen possibly could be picked up by Paul Murphy and Dylan Casey on Conor O'Donnell. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a fair enough matchup. Yeah, like I think look, Conor O'Donnell's been phenomenal this year, hasn't he? Like I think even when you were kind of reading through the stats as well, like he's been one of the more underrated players I think for Donegal this year. So yeah, probably you'd imagine Dylan Casey on him, probably Paul Murphy on Oisin Gallen as well. Will be interesting to see like if they go Oisin Gallen, do they maybe go with Patrick McBurty as well? I know Oisin Gallen's been in great form recently, but Patrick McBurty probably on the big occasion, a big game player, but then do you want him coming off the bench? That's an interesting one as well. But probably Paul Murphy on Oisin Gallen. I do think not having Tom O'Sullivan's a huge loss though, because I think Tom O'Sullivan would have been perfect for Oisin Gallen.
Probably would have. I would have said so as well. So that's probably the full forward line there. Looking at the centre forwards and wing forwards there, like Kieran Thompson, Shane O'Donnell, potentially Kieran Moore there as well. I don't know where Kieran Moore will probably start, but where is he going to play? That's kind of the interesting kind of dynamic. He did play, he started anyway at number 12 against Meath. I think Kieran Moore with Brino Begley is going to be a very, very interesting matchup, I think, because both sides of the coin are very, very speedy kind of players. Both are kind of attacking minded players, even though they do the defensive duties diligently as well. I think Gavin White potentially on Kieran Thompson could be a decent one, or maybe Ty Morley, and then put Gavin White on Shane O'Donnell, who's been kind of the assist king this year. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of the half back line for Kerry and the half forward line for Donegal?
Yeah, like I think, look, I think when you're kind of looking at maybe some of the potential injuries that, Kerry could have in terms of Toig Morley, like he would have obviously been a perfect player to kind of slot in at that number 6 role. But yeah, looking at some of the big players that Donegal can do damage in terms of those areas as well. Like a Kieran Thompson, who's been probably very underrated at times this year. 2-pointers as well is going to be huge as well. I think Donegal have more range of players, I think, that can score 2-pointers, like looking at their team as well. So there's going to be a lot of very interesting matchups there. Like you are looking at, like a Mike Breen maybe on a Kieran Thompson or something like that. Brian O'Begley maybe on Shane O'Donnell. And then kind of Kieran Moore going the other way. Yeah, so it's... Yeah, I don't know. I think Toig Morley's a big one, to be honest with you. I think Jack O'Connor needs to be getting him in the team.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting in terms of the matchups there, and we won't know probably until the throw-in, or maybe even closer to maybe starting 10 minutes to see who actually will go on who, and there will be probably late changes. There's no doubt about that, but we talked about matchups, we talked about stats, we talked about David Clifford's influence, everything, Michael Murphy's influence on the Donegal team as well, Donegal's influence all over the pitch, but this is the big question. Prediction time. So, the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship Final, to put it up again, Kerry against Donegal, 3:30 on Sunday from Croke Park. Aaron, all yours. Who do you think is going to win this?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose as we said on my show yesterday, we won't kind of deviate from that prediction. We'll stick with it. I said Kerry 121, Donegal 120, was my kind of score prediction I've gone with there. Look, my heart says Donegal, but my head says Kerry. I think Kerry just have... I know they like it is kind of interesting. They have lost that, I think I've seen a statistic where this could be the 6th or 7th final that Jack O'Connor could potentially have lost as Kerry manager, which is a little bit interesting. But Kerry have the players who've been here, done it, big game players who can step up when the game's in the melting pot. They have game changers. They have players that can flip a game on a knife edge. You look at the energy and intensity Kerry brought against two very good sides in Armagh and Tyrone as well, and made them look very, very ordinary. I think Clifford will be too hot to handle. I don't think there's a solution you can find to him. The form he's in at the moment, he's going to be brilliant. Sean O'Shea will absolutely step it up. I think midfield, they have the makings of dominating there. And I think for Donegal, like, I think they might look at... I'm only predicting a 1-point win for Kerry, so I think it'll be about the smallest margins. But I do think turnovers will be key as well, and I think Donegal could fall into the Kerry trap a couple of times, and I think Kerry might prevail there.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Kerry might get over the line there. We'll come Aaron back in a sec, but the reason I'm gonna go for Kerry is just David Clifford, Sean O'Shea. They're going to be absolutely brilliant in terms of their forward performances. Clifford's shooting accuracy has been very, very good over the last few games. Sean O'Shea, as I mentioned before, 79% in around that as well, has been absolutely superb. It has been a brilliant season in terms of that from a Kerry point of view. Yes, Thomas Sullivan's a big loss, but I think the likes of Dylan Casey have earned his right to be in the starting lineup for Kerry. Jason Foley, I think, has done very well this season as well. So has Paul Murphy. It's going to be very interesting to see the dynamic in terms of that. But I'm going to say Kerry will get over the line. And I said on your show last night, I think it was 122 to 24 points. I might be wrong on that, but I think that was around the same score on this. I'm thinking in my head, because I don't think Donegal might not score a goal in this one, because their goal scoring has been very, very dried up, in fairness. But when you look at Kerry's goal scoring, they've scored a decent amount of goals. Yes, they only scored one in their last two games against Tyrone and Armagh, but they've shown in the previous rounds 3 goals against Cavan, 3 goals against Cork above in Páirc Uí Chaoimh the wet day, 4 goals against Clare, 3 goals against Roscommon. This Kerry team are capable of hitting the back of the net. And if Paul Gainey is a late change, he's going to be a massive asset for this Kerry team in terms of experience and know-how. I'm going to say Kerry will get over the line by a point, but it's going to be very, very tight. It could go at extra time. We could be here until August, but we'll have to see what happens. It is going to be a very interesting game, and hopefully we will have a good game on Sunday. May the best team win the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship for 2025. Before we end the show, we look at the Camogie Semi Finals, which are on as well. Those are the only other 2 games inter-county wise, and the club scene is well and truly started as well, but obviously it's early stages in all the club championships, so we won't delve into it just yet. We'll go on to the Camogie first of all. Camogie finally. So in the All-Ireland semi-finals, both games are on in UPMC Nolan Park in Kilkenny. So the first game of a double-header on Saturday is at 3 p.m. live on RT2, and it is Galway against Tipperary. Galway finishing top of Group 2, Tipperary finishing second in Group 1, but Tipperary winning the quarter-final against Kilkenny after extra time. And we'll look at Galway and Tipperary's journeys to the final and their scores. So we'll start off with Galway, their journey to the final. They beat Dublin the first day out, 15 points to 1-6. Amazingly, that's Galway's only conceded goal in the 4 games of the Camogie Championship. That's brilliant from Cathal Murray's side's point of view. They beat Derry then 4 goals and 25 points to 5 points. And this is kind of a team, when you look at the scores and the journeys to the finals, there is a fair few batterings when you look at the Camogie Championship. And that is a concern for the Camogie Championship, and a lot of people have been talking about it too. They beat Kilkenny on the third day, 117 to 12 points, and they beat Waterford 17 points to 11 points to qualify automatically for the semi-final stage. Galway have averaged a score of 119 per game and conceded an average of 9 points per game. As I said before, they've only conceded 1 goal in the championship. Look at their scores here. Carrie Dolan has 36 points, and Malin has 15 points. 15 points from play is very, very impressive. Aoife Donoghue has 1 goal and 6 points. Sabina Rabbit has 1 goal and 4 points. Maria Dillon with 1 goal and 3. And you can see down the list for Galway's scores there as well. Look at Tipperary. We'll go to their journey to the final first of all. Look at the first day out. They got a bit of a trimming off Cork. 3 goals and 21 points to 1 goal and 9 points. They didn't hammer Wexford. 7 goals and 18 points to 7 points. Beat Limerick 4 goals and 26 points to 8 points. And then beat Clare in the final group game 4-17 to 10 points. Then beat Kilkenny after extra time in Croke Park. A very good game there. 1 goal and 22 points to 19 points. They've averaged a score of 3 goals and 20 points per game and conceded an average of 1 goal and 12. And you can look at Kilkenny or Tipperary scores there on the screen. So Grace O'Brien has 4 goals and 37 points. Jean Kelly, who's mostly been a sub for Tipperary, has been very, very good in fairness with 2 goals and 9 points. Karen Kennedy has 3 goals and 4 points. Casey Hennessy with 2 goals and 6. Roisin Howard with 1 goal and 8. Mary Burke with 3 goals and 2. And you can see down the list there the scores, including Clodagh McIntyre, who got the crucial goal in the quarter-final in the win over Kilkenny in Croke Park. So looking at the scores there, Aaron, in terms of the journey to the final there, it's a very, very difficult game to call, even though Galway have more experience probably at this stage in terms of All-Ireland semi-finals. But who are you backing here?
I'd probably go with Tipperary, I think. I think Tipperary, in terms of the improvement over the last couple of years that they've made, has been a lot more kind of impressive in regards to that. Like Grace O'Brien was brilliant, I thought, the last day versus Kilkenny. Like, she's coming in great form. And Tipperary probably have a bit more of a spread across the board in terms of scores. Look, Galway have done well as well, to be fair, and as you said, defensively quite strong. Only one goal kind of conceded there. So a lot of positives to kind of take on into it. But I think in terms of where Tipperary have come from, I'd be backing them ever so slightly.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting game when you look at that game. I think Galway could win this, though. Look at the experience there. Like, we've been through this story with Tipperary down through the years. They're on a good brain form, didn't lose to Waterford. They win the league last year, didn't lose to Galway. Could it be the same story for Dennis Kelly's troops? I'm not sure, but it's good. If Tipperary, I'm sure, would want to reach an All-Ireland final. There's no doubt about that, because I don't think Tipperary have reached a Camogie All-Ireland final since 2006. It's a long time ago. Maybe the men could inspire Tipperary in its own right, and you may be right there. I just feel like Galway, despite the fact Niamh Kilkenny and Sarah Dervin are out this season, which is a shame from a Galway point of view, as well as the McGrath and Orla and Siobhan, Carrie Dolan and Niamh Mallon have really taken the mantle really well for Galway, and I think that might get them over the line. And even the last group game against Waterford, they were kind of in an even keel, and Galway's experience just showed, and they got over the line as well, with Sabina Rabbit coming off coming up with a point. I think Tegan Canning coming off the bench getting a point was a massive thing for Galway as well, on a wet day that day in the group stage. I think Galway might get over the line, but we'll have to see what happens in terms of that Camogie semi-final. And the other Camogie semi-final is Cork, the 3-in-a-row chasing Cork team, facing Waterford again in UPMC Nolan Park on Saturday at 5 p.m. live on RT2. Coincidentally, this was supposed to be the Munster Camogie final earlier on the year, but that was cancelled because of the Scarts versus Shorts debacle. Obviously, this isn't a double of the Munster final. It probably should be, to be fair, but look, it isn't. There is a place in the All-Ireland final, though, which is just as important. So we'll look at the Cork journey to the final first, and we'll go on to Waterford in a sec. So we'll look at Cork first of all, and as expected, Germanley's side have basically hammered everybody in the group stages. They beat Limerick 6 goals and 25 points to 5 points. Beat Tipperary 3 goals and 21 points to 1-9. And funny enough, that Tipperary goal was the first goal Cork conceded all season. And the first goal they conceded, I think, since the start of June last year in 2024. That's absolutely outstanding for the Cork defence and the goalkeeper, Amy Lee, as well. They beat Clare 21 points to 1-9, and then beat Wexford 5 goals and 21 points to 11 points. Cork have averaged a score of 4 goals, 21 points per game, and conceded an average of 1-7. That's pretty good, in fairness. Scarily good. You look at Cork's scores there. We mentioned Donegal at the start of the podcast in terms of the spread of scores there. Cork, you could say the same about their Camogie team. Yes, Eamon O'Connor has 5 goals and 27, but you look at the rest of them. Clodagh Finn, 4 goals and 7. Saoirse McCarthy, who I did interview on Star Score podcast this week, give that a listen if you haven't already, with 1 goal and 11 points. And Saoirse obviously is excited about the semi-finals as much as we are. Katrina Mackey with 2 goals and 7 points, Orla Callan with 2 goals and 6. You have Emma Murphy on the list there with 7 as well, and Kate Wall, Saoirse McCartan, Laura Hayes, Aisling Thompson, all on the list from a 3-in-a-row chasing Cork's point of view. Look at Waterford's journey to the final. They did beat Kilkenny on the first day. That was the first ever win over Kilkenny in the Camogie Championship group stage. So fair play to Waterford for that win. They beat 17 points to 10 in Nolan Park as well. So could that be a factor that Waterford are used to the pitch? We'll have to see. Then an absolute slaughtering against Derry. 5 goals and 30 points to 2 points. It didn't do any favours to either side, obviously, there. They beat Dublin 4 goals and 16 points to 2-11. That was a Dublin team that reached the All-Ireland semi-finals last year, so that's very impressive from Waterford. Lost to Galway, bit of a setback there by 17 points to 11, but then got back up on the horse and beat Clare 220 to 210 in the All-Ireland quarter-final in Croke Park. Waterford had averaged a score of 2.19 per game and conceded an average of 1.9. And you look at Waterford scores there. the main scorers have scored a lot. Obviously, Niamh Rockett, 2 goals and 37 points. Beck Carton with 2 goals and 18. Annie Fitzgerald with 4 goals and 9. Abby Flynn, should I say, with 3 goals and 10 points. And you can see down the list, including the likes of Lorraine Bray, the captain of the team, and Mairead O'Brien on the list. Emer O'Neill has been very impressive from a Waterford point of view as well. I think I probably know who you're going to say is going to win this, Aaron, and it's probably going to be Cork. But the question is, can Waterford cause a surprise or even test Cork in any way?
Yeah, it's a hard one to know. Like, I remember the final a couple of years ago, and I think could Waterford maybe kind of do a bit of something there, and Cork kind of just blew them away. So, no, I think Cork are too powerful, too strong. As you said, like with Amy O'Connor, like she's been in phenomenal form this year, in particular. So, no, I think Cork should have a bit too much here. Look, I'd love to see a bit of a shock, a surprise. But no, look, I think Cork will get back in the final. Who knows? Cork Tipperary going to run it back in the Camogie final.
Yeah, it probably could be. I don't want the similar result as the Mings. I'll put it that way. You'd want the Camogie team to win at this particular moment in time, but just the thing about the Camogie Championship in general, we are predicting. You're predicting Cork and Tip final. I'm predicting Cork and Galway. But in terms of the journeys to the finals for all the teams there, the batterings that some of the teams inflicted on the likes of Derry and the likes of Wexford, on the likes of Clare, Limerick, and all them teams. That has to be a concern for the Camogie Championship going down the line, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, they need to look at that. Because like seeing like the 2 results that probably stood out was the Galway hammer and Derry, and then Waterford did something similar as well. So no, absolutely they need to look at that because trying to grow the sport, grow the games and everything else. And we've managed to fix it more in men's football. It's been fixed in ladies football for a while as well. So I think Camogie now needs to be, hurling obviously has its separate tiers. So I think and I know Camogie does have different tiers as well, but they need to kind of fix it up a little bit, in my opinion, because no, you can't be having these absolute batterings. It doesn't do any good for anyone.
Yeah, exactly. It is something that the Camogie Association need to fix. But then again, there's no B teams in the intermediate and junior, so other teams are given a chance. In fairness, other counties more so, rather than Cork's B team or Kilkenny's B team, the likes of even the intermediate championship having Offaly and Kerry in the final is actually very good for the game and growing the game in different counties. So it is great to see it on that point of view. But then again, that probably needs to be fixed at senior level. So that is the podcast. That is the 2 Camogie semi-finals wrapped up, and obviously the All-Ireland final between Kerry and Donegal, which we're both predicting a Kerry win. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff as well. Ring the bell for any notifications on any upcoming podcasts in the next few weeks. Thanks to Sean O'Malley, who was busy on the comments tonight in terms of the podcast, and thanks to Capture Athletics for sponsoring today's show. Thanks to Aaron for coming on to tonight's show as well. Next week we will preview the LGFA final, and I'll try to get maybe a big guest on, maybe a former player or something like that, in terms of discussing the LGFA final. Then there's the Camogie finals, and obviously there's the gradings and things like that to end the season as well. Sean just coming in with a last comment here. Good pod, lads. Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you very much for the comments. Thanks to Aaron. Thanks to Capture Legs for sponsoring tonight's show. And until next week, we'll see you then. Take care and enjoy the All-Ireland final at the weekend.